Lord Mayor Vincent Brown. Thank you. I won't be speaking too long, don't worry. I first met Patsy over 20 years ago on a very, very cold, very, very dark December evening after a meeting in Archbishop's house. And I remember looking at the shivering media gathering as I answered questions and thinking, how glamorous is journalism, you know? But the reality is in this book, where Patsy tells us about, we get insight into the work he's done over so many years, what goes into putting together the articles and reports that we've all read in the Irish Times, and also, which I found interesting, was putting sometimes the decision not to publish something, or it was important not to publish rather than to publish. I found that very interesting. In the 30 years since our hero took up his position with the Irish Times as Religious Affairs Correspondent, the country has, Irish society has changed out of all recognition. A lot of that has to do with the change in the dynamic between the church and state, and as we know, looking at it from the point of view of a survivor of abuse, I saw those years through those eyes, that perspective. But the book, I think, does a wonderful job of showing the entire picture, not just the part of it someone like myself saw, you know. But that's not all. The Northern Ireland and from Corry and all those stories that were even before Patsy was with the Irish Times, I found fascinating. In the book, we travel to different places and meet different people along with Patsy, including traveling the papal bubble, which was quite interesting. One of the interesting people we meet is that dark lady in Cuba. I don't think that encounter ever got into the Irish Times. You'll have to read the book. It's not a biography, this book, but we do learn a lot about, I think, what makes Patsy tick, although people like myself have known him over the years. There's a lot of things that I didn't know. The pen picture of the early days in the thatched house in Roscommon, and how things worked in rural Ireland in the 50s and 60s, where the church had a vice-like grip on society. And as a teenager, we learned Patsy, even then, was kicking in his own way against the status quo, successfully, I've got to say. I don't want to say a lot more, except that I can't finish without saying something personally about myself and Patsy. When I met Patsy on that cold winter day back in 2003, I think it might have been, I was at a difficult point in my life. As with many others, I'd gone public on my abuse as a child by a Catholic priest. And I had gone public, as others had gone public, to expose the fact that the Catholic Church was covering up the abuse of children by its priests. And we wanted to expose this and make it known. But without courageous journalists like Patsy and others, but Patsy was out there in the forefront, without journalists like that at our back, we could never have succeeded. The church leadership thought that its power and authority would silence the survivors. But they reckoned without journalists like Patsy, and thank God for him. Over the years that I've known Patsy, we've met many times, and from early days I knew Patsy was a man of integrity, someone I could trust, and someone who I'm very happy to say, glad to say, and proud to say has become a friend. One memory that sticks in my mind took place in Rome when I was still a member of the Pontifical Commission. and I'd had a really bad day, and we met over pizza. I don't know if Patsy remembers, but I was frustrated to the point of tears with what was happening in the Vatican. I mean, there's people that say it's a toxic place. Well, when you meet it up close, and when they're not happy with you and are trying to stop you do something that should be done, as I was working with many of us to try and improve safeguarding, and we were coming up against a brick wall, the frustration and the fact, as I say, that people do say it's a toxic place, that's an understatement, honestly. And that day, I was just so angry and so frustrated, and at the end of my tether completely. And over this pizza, I poured out my despair and anger at this poor man across the table. And I'm sure in what I was saying, there was a good story in there somewhere for a Religious Affairs Correspondent, but I knew I could trust Patsy, and he didn't let me down. Not a word appeared in print. And I wanted to thank you for that, Patsy. I know I'm not the only one. Over the years, Patsy has supported so many people in so many areas. And I think always put the person, the individual, before just getting a good story and getting something down on paper. And I think that's a wonderful legacy, Patsy. Thank you so much. So that's really all I want to say. Thank you, Patsy, for what you've done for people like myself and what you did over the years to help bring about the situation we have today, where, as I say, the church no longer has that vice-like grip of control over our society. And I want to thank you